Welcome to the Leadership to Wealth podcast. Guys, we have an amazing episode for you today. This guest has sold a business for 8 figures. They've sold another business for 9 figures. He shares with us today how he got into business, how he's gotten through business. He's an author. He's got his own podcast, and he really shares with how to view your future so that you can be making that happen today. Not like a person looking out into the dark, staring, wondering, how do I get there? If you've ever wondered that, this is the show to watch with our special guest, Mike Malatesta. And on today's show, we have Mike Malatesta. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Neil, it's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm actually really interested in asking you a couple things. Obviously, I've gotten to get to know you a little bit in preparation for this, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more of your story and really sharing that with the viewers and the listeners. What I want to start with, though, is if you can sort of introduce yourself a little bit and tell us, where you're from, where you're born and raised, and just give us a quick synopsis of where you are to now and the How'd It Happen podcast.
Okay, sure, will do. So I was raised in a small town called Havertown outside of Philadelphia. And I had a great childhood there. Really nice family, great community. We sort of rallied around the Catholic Church there when I was growing up. And I just wouldn't, I guess, so many people look back on their childhood and they have some issue with something. And I really didn't have any issue with anything. I just, I had a good, I had a good upbringing. And I moved to Wisconsin in 1990. So I've been here for a long time, Neil. So it kind of feels like, it definitely feels like home, but it's not, nothing's the same as where you grew up.
Right.
Professionally, I became an entrepreneur when I was 26, and I've started and grew and sold 2 waste management companies that specialized not in trash so much as in helping manufacturers with complex waste problems related to the byproducts, wastewater and sludges and hazardous waste and those kinds of things from the making of everything that we love to have in our life, our cars, our clothes, our shampoo and soap and all that stuff. So that's what most of my professional career has been like. I've been very fortunate to have those 2 companies and have been able to sell them as well. And that's helped me fuel a couple of my other passions, one of which is the podcast, as you mentioned, the How'd It Happen podcast, which you can find on Apple or any podcast platform. And that's I've been doing for about 3 years. And if you want to get into that more, we can. But I've also been very fortunate to get involved in a lot of investing outside of the companies that I've owned or been a part of. And I have this sort of mission now to help 1,000 entrepreneurs create companies that are valued at least $20 million each. And then encouraging those 1,000 entrepreneurs to impact 10 other entrepreneurs each the same way. And if I'm, anywhere close to being successful with that over time, over my lifetime, that's going to create hundreds of billions of dollars in value. And I don't just mean this for the money, but in value to the world. And I really can't think of anything else professionally, at least that I could do that would have a bigger impact than that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That is, the magnitude of that is huge. That goal.
It's a little scary. Yeah.
As I'm just letting that seep in, and I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing and inspiring. And we're definitely going to get into a number of those things that you just shared there.
Sure.
One of the things I kind of want to talk about is because we always like to kind of look back a little bit in terms of, hey, you're here now, you're quite successful, you've sold 2 businesses, and you're continuing to build more. We want to hear more about the podcast and your writing. You've written your own book. I want to hear some more about this. But I know that when you were a kid, because this is a little bit different than most. When you were a kid, you saw yourself working in a cemetery. Is that correct?
Well, I didn't see myself. I actually did work in a cemetery.
Okay.
Yeah.
You gotta shed a little bit more light on that one.
Okay. Well, I sort of progressed in life from job-wise from a newspaper boy, which was
Yeah.
my first job, riding around with my bike with a basket on the front, and I would fold the newspapers and toss them around the neighborhood, and then go collect for the money. That was a great experience in how to run your own sort of tiny little mega business. And then I moved up from there to caddying. So I would caddy at the local golf course, which was another outstanding experience because that showed the incredible dichotomy, for me at least, of different places in life. So all of the caddies were either grade school or high school kids like me, or they were professional caddies, meaning they weren't, in most cases, it wasn't like being a tour caddy. These caddies were they were struggling through life. Let's put it that way. And then we'd get our name called, and we'd go from the caddy shack up top to this was and continues to be an exclusive golf club, and you just got a chance to see how the rest of the world lives, kind of thing. So it was a very interesting dynamic that I found myself in. And fortunately, I tried to take as many lessons as I could from the people that we were caddying for, as opposed to the people we were playing cards with while we were waiting to get out. And then I moved into the cemetery, which was really a coveted summer job for high schoolers in the neighborhood, because you got to work outside. You were doing cutting the grass, and you were doing funerals and all that stuff, and it just seemed kind of cool, and you could walk there, so it was so I did that. I really enjoyed that.
You would be officially the first person that I've ever heard say working at the cemetery was cool.
Yeah, it was cool. And I'll tell you why it was cool. One, you're working with your friends for the most part. So that's cool. And then we had we had a sense of humor. So the local,
you were allowed to have a sense of humor.
Yeah,
in a cemetery.
We had a sense of humor. So here's an example of a sense of humor. We had T-shirts that we wore, but on the backs of the T-shirts were all these sort of very interesting cemetery-related statements. Like, for example, "The last to let you down" was one of the sayings on the back of the T-shirts that we wore. So during funerals, of course, we had to turn the T-shirts inside out, because you can't. That kind of sense of humor doesn't really fly when when your loved one is the center of attention. But yeah, it was a fun place to work. So fun, to get to answer your question. So fun that when I went to college after a semester, I dropped out, because I went back to work at the cemetery, because I thought this was a cool job and I could make a career out of this. Maybe I could become the supervisor, and maybe, run the show one day. Plus it put money in my pocket, and it felt good to me, to have money in my pocket at that age. And I just thought, what do I need school for? So I did drop out of school to work a semester at the cemetery. And fortunately for me, in retrospect, the brother who's like kind of like a priest who ran the cemetery at the near the end of that summer told me that he wouldn't be able to hire me back full time in the fall, unfortunately, and that I should maybe think about going back to school. So I don't know if my parents conspired with Brother Richard on that. Could have been, sort of behind my back, but that's how I ended up going back to college, and then I graduated.
Right. That's amazing. So, oh my goodness, I do you have kids of your own, Mike?
I do, yeah, 2
Oh,
kids. Yeah,
2 kids.
yeah.
Okay.
They're
Well, let me
adults now,
ask.
I guess, but
um, let me ask you this because you mentioned something interesting about having a paper route, working these summer jobs, and it seemed like to me as a kid that this was just a normal part. You tried to get one of these jobs, and it was coveted if you could get the paper route. It was coveted, if you could get some of these jobs. And whereas now I don't see kids really wanting to. Well, in fact, you can't get the paper route job anymore because
there are
adults
none.
have,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and any that there are, the adults have them
Yeah, the
because
car.
yeah, and yeah, they have the car. They move around and throw them all at the stairs, or they're putting them there, but they just don't. They don't even want the kids to be doing them. But kids don't really want those jobs as much as as perhaps we did in those days, McDonald's and the like.
Yeah.
Can you speculate at all about perhaps what might have changed from when you were a kid wanting those
Hmm.
jobs to where we are now?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have a computer, so I didn't know. I didn't have these other things that I could um, look at. I didn't have the internet. I didn't have any of those things. So the only thing I had was the neighborhood meal. That's all I knew,
Mm.
and that's just what we did. There was no, you know, there were
The-
it was just a small world. That's all I knew. So I did. My parents said, "Hey, well, you need to make money," and so I was like, "Okay, well, these are the things I can do. So I'll try to do those."
right, that's really interesting. I actually heard someone say this morning. They were saying one of the things about our generation that's really different than perhaps some of our parents' generation or some of the younger kids is that we didn't have the internet and all of these things. And so as a result, and in fact, we had, what did they say? Oh, they said, I think we can sum it all up with the fact that we we only had Saturday morning cartoons. And
Right. Hmm.
that, and so by and large, and I think that was only an hour or two on Saturdays that you got one or two shows, and then that was about it, right? So
Hmm.
by and large,
Yeah. To
go outside,
completely.
go do
Yeah.
whatever.
Completely. And when I was a kid, sand was just something you played with. It wasn't something that you looked at and go, "Well, this could be a microchip." We just never looked at it that way.
As they
Yeah,
say, we built castles in the sky,
that's right.
in the sand,
Yeah.
right? That's amazing. Okay, all right. So that actually really does speak to something there for why you would get into it so early, and why perhaps kids have a harder time with that because there are so many things vying for their attention.
Yeah.
Now, here you are building and luckily getting kicked out of the cemetery. I mean, I know we're all dying to get there, but
Hmm.
you know,
See, that would have been on the back of one of our T-shirts. You're dying
I
to
know
get
you
here. Yeah.
just tried to get that one in. Um, so here we are. You get kicked out of there, and now you go back to school and waste management. How did that come about?
A love of trucks. That's how that came
Oh,
about. So
okay.
when I was 4, um, before any of those jobs that I mentioned, we lived across the street from a construction company,
Ah,
and
yes. Okay.
uh, and I would sit on the curb in the summer in the afternoons, and I would watch the guys bring back their trucks and their equipment, and I was just fascinated by all of it. The, you know, the, the noise, the dust, the exhaust, and the guys. I just thought it was a very, very, very cool way to uh, to operate. And I think that when I was 4, sitting on that curb, there was an entrepreneurial seed that was planted in me. Um, and I had no idea, of course, what an entrepreneur was or a business owner or anything, but whatever was happening across the street looked cool to me and something that I would like to do with my life. And so the cemetery was actually kind of an extension of that, because I got to operate some of the equipment that we would use to dig the graves and to fill them back in. Dump truck, that we would haul stuff around in and that kind of thing. And then between my junior and senior year in college, I wanted to get a job driving a truck, and I and I did get a job driving a trash truck, garbage truck. And so that's where the waste thing came in. So I had no aspirations to get into that industry. I just wanted a job driving a truck, and that's the job that I was fortunate to get. And once I had it, I just really enjoyed pretty much everything about it. And I enjoyed the business. And so I went to the owner at the end of that summer, and I asked him for advice, and he told me that I should, if this interested me, I should try to get in a management training program or a sales program with one of the bigger companies. And so when I was time to send my resumes out, that's what I did. And I got hired by one of them as a management trainee. And that's how I ended up in the waste business in the first place.
Okay. So, fortune favors the bold. And you just put yourself out there, and there you had it. You got into this program. But I'm really curious about this. You two waste management companies, sold them both for multiple figures, multiple figures. And I believe one was for 9 figures, you said? Is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so one was for 9 figures, one was for 8?
That's right.
Okay. That's a lot of zeros. And so that's a long way to go from a management trainee program to running and owning these types of businesses, and then being able to navigate the sale of them, because quite frankly, most entrepreneurs will go their entire life, work way more hours than the average person with a job, and at the end will pretty much still have about as much as a person who had a regular job, right? Now they've probably enjoyed themselves a lot more. They got to call more shots. They may have had more flexibility in their schedule. At the end of the day, they just got to do it the Frank Sinatra way, my way, right? And so they've got that. But what was the key to you building not one, but 2 8 and 9 figure businesses?
Well, the key to the second was the first. So
being able to sell them while you're still young enough to then go on and do more stuff.
Yeah. The key to the second one was the first one. And so that's a simple answer there. The key to the first one was a lot more of a struggle, because we bootstrapped that business from nothing. So when I say startup, I mean startup. And it was a very exciting, but also a very at times de-energizing process. And when you mentioned that the journey that a lot of entrepreneurs take, that's sort of the purpose of the book I wrote, which is called Ownership. I think entrepreneurs should always think big, because getting into it is very, very difficult. Um, and as long as you're into it, you might as well go as big with your thinking and as big with your company as is possible to go, in my opinion, because you're going to work just as hard, probably harder, to not go big. But and from my own experience, I I for the first 10 years or so, um, I did not do very much shifting. Um, Meaning, I got in, uh, at the beginning, which is what I call the dream stage, and you're just so excited, and you're gonna crush it, right? You're just gonna crush it, and everything that you do is a win. It's like everything is exciting, even if you lose, it's still exciting because you're in that sort of dream phase of it. And then at some point, and for most of us, and certainly for me, it transitioned into what I call the grind phase. And the grind phase is that phase where the dream starts to really get blurred with all the stuff that has to be done in order for you to grow. And all the things that excited me by the time I was 10 years into the business were frustrating me, and they were making me angry, and I was disillusioned with myself, so at that point I fell into this place that I call the valley of uncertainty, Neil. And that valley is a place where I think a lot of entrepreneurs end up, and why they don't get where they ultimately should be, at least in my estimation, because that valley is the place where they feel stuck. They don't know what to do. They are completely de-energized. They're looking for someone to blame for what's happened to them, and they don't see. At least this was my experience. I didn't see what that where I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And until I became aware of that, Neil, it was very difficult to make progress, to get through what I call to break through. And I think that's what happens to so many of us, because we have, we get it started, the dream goes, the dream is like alive, and then the work sort of takes over, and all of a sudden you're not doing anything that you thought you wanted to do in the dream stage. You're doing all the things that have to be done. And you're basically sort of, creating a path for yourself that leads to this valley. And once you're in the valley, most stay stuck there, because the natural tendency when you're in the valley is to retreat, not to advance.
Okay, let me pause you for a quick second there, Mike.
Yeah.
All right, so guys, if you're listening, we're talking about being an entrepreneur, and how oftentimes entrepreneurs get into the valley in their businesses and they get stuck there. And we're here with Mike Malatesta, and he is sharing about how to be able to start a business and work your way in and out of the valley. I think we get into the valley naturally, but and the name of your book is Owner Shift. I like the play on words. That's great.
Thank you.
And people can find that on Amazon and the like. Where can people find that book?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. Owner Shift: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck by Mike Malatesta.
Malatesta. Okay, great. And on top of that, if you want to hear more, you can also hear Mike on his podcast, How'd It Happen? Okay, so all right, so gosh, you're so speaking to me right now that, and I've been in these places so many times, and oftentimes I've thought, it's a good thing I like grinding, or perhaps that my mom and dad told me to, that's what life is going to be to some degree. So when I find myself there, I'm almost like, oh, okay, this is where it almost feels a certain amount of natural. So I don't feel the need to run as much as perhaps other people that close up shop at that point, give up. so you're really speaking to me, and I think you're really speaking to a lot of the listeners right now. So, Mike, business owners, entrepreneurs, they've got that dream, and then they find themselves in the valley.
Yeah.
And now what? Like, you just don't know, where do we go from here? You can no longer see the rainbow coming out on the other side. There's no longer that. Now it's, well, I'm doing this, and you're almost tied to a business, like a job, for
Yes.
however long. And you can't.
Right. You
Why
get into,
why don't I just go back and get a job like the other people?
well, like you said, Frank Sinatra, I did it my way, but unless your way is about, the expansion of freedom and all the other positive things that come with being an entrepreneur, your way might not be that great of a way. And so
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that was my experience, Neil. And the reason that, I mean, the mind shift thing that I think is very powerful here is when you find yourself in that situation. And as you said, you it's normal. It's not abnormal. It's normal.
Yeah.
But when you find yourself in that situation, in addition to being okay with the fact that it's normal, although not using that as an excuse, that's I think a lot of people go, well, it's normal. This is what should happen. It's what does happen. I don't know that it's what should happen.
Right. Okay.
But the mind shift thing for me is, and this was not an overnight epiphany or anything, but as I was struggling to figure it out, it finally occurred to me that I designed a system that was perfectly suited to put me exactly where I am.
Yes.
And so that can either be depressing or it can be very encouraging. So for me, it was both, right? It was like, oh, why did I do that? Right. But then the encouraging part of it was, if I designed a system that was perfectly suited to put me right where I am, and I can accept that as being my truth, then I can certainly accept as my next truth that I can design a system that's perfectly suited to put me somewhere else where I want to be. I don't have to stay here. Like, I was very successful in designing this, and this is where it led me. So maybe I didn't think it through all the way, but it was very successful. And so now I can design something successful that helps me get to a different future, a future that I actually want to own, that I want to make my property.
Right. So you found yourself that you had built your own prison. You'd built your own casket.
Thank you.
I got another cemetery one in there.
I can't wait for the third one.
Don't worry, it'll come to me.
Sure
we're just dying to get there. So you've built this prison, and I believe it, especially since entrepreneurship is so much of a journey where we're trying to learn about ourselves in the process. Oftentimes I can really hear what you're saying when you're talking about how the second business was easier because you'd already built the first. You'd already learned a lot of those lessons, and so you could skip through a lot of things, skip over even some of the valleys. Okay, so you saw that, and then you said, all right, it's time to, I've got to pull myself out of this. I've got what happened to start to then be able to transition out of the valley? How'd you get out of the valley?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. It was funny you said, how do you get out? Because for a long time while I was in there, Neil, I was wondering the same thing, and I was wishing that someone would come along and put their giant hand down into that valley and grab a hold of me and pull me up out of there and dust me off and say, everything's going to be okay. Here's here's what you need to do. Well, that person never comes. Right? That person never comes. And so ultimately, and that's why the subtitle of the book is How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. I really had to get selfish about me about what I wanted, about what I wanted my future to be. Because until I was able to do that, um, I I was going to stay where I was, Neil, because um, the only the things that I had been doing, as I said, put me there, and I didn't realize that I was until I did finally realize. I didn't realize that what I was doing was, was the reason that I ended up there. And um, and I was one of those people that I described myself as selfless. Like I would put everybody else first.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I came last, right? So, and I thought, well, that's what all the business books, say you should do, right? Is
Yeah.
the servant leader
Take
is
care
take
of
care of
other
your people,
people,
and they'll take care of
and you'll
you,
get,
right?
yeah.
And I think that's true, but it's only true if I really know where it is I want to go. When
Okay.
I don't know that, or I don't think about it for long periods of time, which often happens when you get into, the grind part of being an entrepreneur, then the selflessness starts to become an excuse. At least it was to me, an excuse not to do the job that I'm here to do. Like it's takes up all your time to be selfless. And so that feels very productive. It feels very heroish. It feels like you're very important. And it also is a way for you to say, I don't have time to think about the future. I don't have time to think about what I want. There's no, everything that you could say after you say there's no time for, put in whatever you want. That's what ends up happening. And so um, it was a very difficult um, change for me to decide that I wanted to be selfish, but and of course I don't mean selfish in a way that it's typically, defined or interpreted by
Right.
people where it's all about you. It's
Yeah.
what I mean is
Greedy and narcissistic. You're
yeah,
not
yeah,
talking about,
it's
yeah.
not yeah, it's not that. It's just if I don't know where I'm going, how can I expect other people to help me get there? And
Mhm.
if I'm not being my best self, how can I expect the other people on my team to be their best selves? That's the kind of
Yeah.
thinking I'm talking about. So
Mm.
uh when you're in that valley and you can't make that shift, I think what ends up happening, and this is what beats people down, is like, why should I continue doing this? Because the future is going to look just like the present and just like the past. Instead of, no, I can change the way that I'm doing things, and the future is going to look much different because I'm going to
Mm.
decide what it is, and then I'm going to move toward it. So I'm going to decide
Mm.
what it is. I'm going to decide what I want it to look like. I'm going to decide the, that it's my property, that I deserve it and I own it, and I'm going to pay for it. And here's how I'm going to do it. Um, and so that's the difference, I think. So once you got to be selfish to do that, and once you're successful, once you're selfish and you can get that first sort of breakthrough set into your mind and then bring it back to your business, um, it's you can then be selfless again because you've sort of set the charge. You know where you want to be, and so you can explain it to everybody, for example. But you can also build
Mhm.
just a much better team then, because you the way to the future is not um, the way from the past. So you have to change as an entrepreneur, and you have to change as a
Mm.
leader, and you have to change your team probably as well.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I mean, for the entrepreneurs out there, they are, they're here listening to this, and I think you've got them on the edge of their seat. Like this is the real deal for an entrepreneur. They are sitting out there, and oftentimes, if they're really honest with themselves and they look in the mirror, what they see is that their ego is really enjoying what they're doing because they're needed, they're serving people, they're doing all of these things, and that feels great, but I'm burning out, or I how long can I keep this up, and can I make
Right.
it to the next stage, and then especially now where, and I see this all the time, entrepreneurs looking at social media and seeing all these other people that oh, I put this money into Bitcoin and I made
Right.
this, and you're like, what the heck? I've been
Yeah.
I've
What am
been
I
killing
doing wrong?
myself for all
Right.
this time, and and now I got this guy over here telling me that I'm an idiot and I should have been doing that, and people really have that is, and probably one of the things that I see that probably is really challenging for entrepreneurs is they see that, and then they make the biggest mistake, I think, is then they go, oh, let me go chase down that one, let me see if that's the way, and now they start spreading themselves thinner and thinner into this pot and that pot, and
Yeah.
now which, like a roulette table, how many different bets can I put down, which one's going to pay off?
Right. I I think you're right. Shiny object syndrome is sometimes something that we're accused of having. Um,
Yeah.
but that whole thing that you mentioned about social media. So this whole notion that so and so is smarter than I am because they post something that looks more clever than what I would think about posting,
Mm.
and that makes me think that I want to be like that person is such a waste of time. Um, at least in my estimation, it is. If you focus as much time on what you're doing as you do on what other people are doing, you would have an amazingly successful business and career. Um,
Mm.
but and I think you were intimating this, and I hope I'm not sounding like that, but like a person who's like, oh, it's so easy, you just do this, because it's not anything close to easy. And anybody that tells you it's easier, that they have a shortcut or a clue or a secret, is probably trying to sell something.
Mm.
And the way they make their money is by selling you something you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Yeah.
they can't do either. So,
Yeah.
so maybe that's a successful business model, but it's not a successful business. That's for sure.
Mm. Wow. I really want to jump onto something that you just mentioned as well about waiting for someone to reach down,
Yeah.
and y- that a lot of the reason that for me, even on the podcast, was recognizing the lack of mentorship I had growing up. And we're putting this out there, we're putting out our stories, you're talking about the years of slogging it out and being in the valley and not
Yeah.
knowing where giving some truth to it, so I can completely understand and relate to that feeling of, please, somebody just tell me that I'm going down the right way, or that I'm, is it this way or is it that way? Because quite frankly, I think a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs have probably spoken to someone who has said, oh, okay, yeah, you need to do this. I mean, there's so many business coaches out there. You don't even really know, how do I know where to go? How do
Yeah.
I recognize if this is the person I should be working with? And can they actually get me to the next stage of where I want to go? How
Yeah.
does an entrepreneur navigate that?
Well, a couple of things that have worked for me, I'll share, and whether they directly answer your question or not, you tell me. But um, first of all, the I think that one of the things that leads you into the valley is you surround yourself, whether you build walls around it or not. You use the term walls. I use that in my book too, that I built walls around me, interestingly enough. Um, you surround yourself or put walls around you where everyone that's inside of those walls uh, has something called a paycheck that you happen to sign. And the likelihood that you're going to get, unfiltered feedback from those people is probably low. Um, you're going to get good feedback, good positive feedback all the time, making you think that, what you're doing is the right thing to be doing. So how could I be feeling like it's not the right thing, right? Everybody's
Mhm.
telling me it's the right thing, or no one's telling me it's the wrong thing. Is probably
Mm.
probably. Um, so for me, it's hard to get, and this is even with a coach. I mean, it's hard to get it's hard to know that you're getting good feedback from someone that you're paying, right? It's just it's hard to know. So I think quantification comes into that, which
Right.
means you actually have to know what you want to accomplish before you know if someone is helping you accomplish those things.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, and it's been very helpful for me, is to get into groups with other business owners who don't have any connection to me. They don't,
Mm.
their opinion of me doesn't impact their wallet one bit, and my opinion of them doesn't impact my wallet one bit. And when you get into groups like that, I find that um, you can, now it's not coaching. I'm not saying it's the same as coaching, but you you can start to get perspectives on your, if you're willing to actually tell people what you are thinking and what you are going through, which a lot of times you're not, because you get in these
Mm.
groups and you're like, I want to make sure I look as good as I can look to all of these other people. But if you're willing to get to that place where you say, I don't know, and then whatever comes after that, I don't know, and you listen to what these other people have to say, that can be a nice way to open the door to your own thinking, if you're willing to do that. And I mean real, like, not, Neil, I'm sure you've been to plenty of groups and plenty of business networking things and stuff where it's like, how's business? And it's like, it's great, man. We're crushing it, right? Yeah, everyone's crushing it. But the coaching business is like going through the roof, right? So not everyone's crushing it. Um, so you have to get into a space where you feel safe talking to people who have no financial interest in you except but have a goal of helping you. And if you can get really open with those people, they can help a ton, point you in the right direction, or at least get your thinking different than the thinking that you have when you're in the walls of your own business, for example.
Wow, you just spoke to me on so many different levels. Obviously, being in those some of those groups, some of those networking parties and the like, um, I'm usually not the person that's the most liked because I do like a certain amount of truth. And after we get the "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing great." We get that out of the way. Okay, now how are we really doing? What are Um, and and I'm usually pretty open about sharing, hey, this part of my business is working well. This part is, quite frankly, it's failing, and I'm not sure what to do there. And I think one of the difficult things for entrepreneurs, and I think perhaps just people in general, is when you do that, when someone shares like that with you, then you feel like, oh, now I got to tell them, oh, actually, you know what, this is going bad for me as well, which creates a bit of safety there. But one of the things I've seen um, is that sometimes there is a bit of remorse for entrepreneurs that, oh man, now I admitted that I wasn't doing good, and you know, um, and we don't necessarily like having to admit that to other people because then we have
Mm-hmm.
to accept that ourselves. So I'm not always the most fun guy at parties, but that is interesting that you were saying that, because what it has led to is when I then do meet other business owners that are willing to talk on that level, man, do you ever learn a ton of things,
Yeah.
because then they start sharing some real life, like real practices, mindset, and just shifts that
Mm.
can totally make a difference.
Yeah, it's very liberating when you decide that you don't have to know everything.
Yeah, well, okay, guys, if you're listening, I'm Mike and I are just sharing whatever's going on for us right now, and so I'm trying to give it, and I'm taking from Mike's wisdom right now, and I hope you guys are too. And so what I would share about that, Mike, is any time that I have shared on that level, that I've on a vulnerable level, when another entrepreneur, another business owner now meets me there, that feeling of someone reaching down and grabbing you
Yeah.
actually occurs, because they all of a sudden share something. You know what? I've been there, and this is how I got through it. And that is literally the most amazing feeling as a business owner, to when you can be in that spot and you know how hopeless you feel, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden you actually get solid advice and direction from someone who, yeah, you're right, in most cases doesn't have anything to
Yeah.
gain from that.
Yeah, and once you've progressed to that point, your values get shallow, right? Because like my value is deep because I hadn't progressed to that point. So I didn't know how to get
Mm.
out. But now, and I still get into valleys, of course, right?
Oh,
Things go
valleys,
wrong and
yeah.
you're like, oh man. But you've got that support network. So your valley is very shallow. You know right away you can have a discussion with someone about it and they can probably do enough to tug you out of there, right? Because you already
Mm.
have the confidence that you know you can get out of there. You just have to spend a little bit of time in there, as just to, you know, because you just have to get in there, right? And you just have to be
Yeah,
down on yourself for a little bit, and then someone pulls
yeah,
you back up.
yeah. Well, I don't know if it's even needing to be down. Sometimes I think it just, if you can just have a curiosity about it,
Mm,
um, or I've heard a great term, just being discovery. There's something there, and just being discovery of what that is. And if you have that curiosity, that discovery, and you acknowledge, as you said, that you don't know everything, then all
yeah,
of a sudden a whole world opens up, that where you can hear other people share their experiences and potentially learn from that, or you can listen to them and go, nah, that's not going to work, and move on. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?
sure, yep, yeah,
um okay, so I got to ask then, you go through the valleys, and I'm guessing you talk a little bit about some of the ways to get out of the valley
hmm
and refocus. Um, and but what, how in the world did you get from there to being able to sell your business for 8 figures? Like, how did you? What was the secret to really even? Did you know in advance that you were building that business to get there, to get to that point to sell it?
no, at the very beginning in the dream thing, like before we'd ever earned a dollar, I had these sort of very grandiose sort of ideas about what it could become,
Yeah.
Neil. But 10 years into it, I was thinking about quitting, not about, what it could
Mm,
become. So I'd
right.
say no is
Right.
the answer there. Um,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
so one of the most impactful things that happened to me and helped, get me started getting out of this valley was I joined a program called the Strategic Coach, which is an entrepreneurial coaching program, but it's not a one-on-one coaching program.
Okay.
It's a workshop coaching program. And I went there and I started learning some new stuff, being around some new people, as I mentioned before, that, that didn't have a financial interest in me at all. Um, but one of the things that um, I look at and I write about in the book as being something that really helped me make that shift that I needed to make was um, the person who created that program is named Dan Sullivan, and when we would go to a workshop, we would, yeah, I'm dating myself here, but we would get CDs in the information that we received, and on the way home from the workshop, I would listen to the CDs, and he's just an unbelievable thinker, and coach. But I was driving back from one of the sessions, Neil, and listening to him, and he was talking about this high school reunion that he was at. Maybe it was his 50th high school reunion or something like that, maybe 45. And he was describing what the people who he had gone to school with, how they had sort of turned out and what they were thinking about, what they were talking about, that kind of thing. And he said 5 words in that CD that just changed a lot for me, changed the game for me. He said, "My future is my property." And like I said, he was describing this. this high school reunion environment. But when he said my future is my property, and then he said, it's not my parents, it's not my employees, it's not the government's, it's not anybody, it's mine. That made everything about being selfish and all the other stuff really start to make sense. Like, it just solidified the fact that I can own the future. I can create the future I want. It's not something that's just going to happen to me unless that's what I want. So that was a game-changing 5 words for me, because I'd never heard anything like that before in my life.
My future is my property.
That's right.
That I just had to stop, find a notebook, write that down. I know obviously any of us that are listening, we can go back and rewind it. But I was just so in the moment there that I thought, I have to write this down right now, because I think for all of us, it's really, there's just a handful of moments that can really make a difference, because things can click for us, right? Yeah. And what I just heard you say with my future is my property, I actually heard, and I'm not sure that this was even what you were speaking to, and perhaps you can clarify, but it's something that perhaps that I think about in terms of perhaps speaking into like speaking the future into existence to some degree. Like I have to create that to then go in that direction. And my future is my property. I don't know. I'm literally, what I'm hearing is like that belongs to me. And if it belongs to me, I better know what it is.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. See, nobody thinks about their future as being their property. I certainly didn't before I heard Dan say that. But because everybody thinks that the future is unpredictable. The future is just something that's going to happen to you. The future is just an uncontrollable thing. And yeah, there are things about the future that you're not going to be able to control. But the more you know about the future you want, the more you are going to be able to control. At least that's what I believe. And that's what's been very helpful for me, to continue to make breakthroughs instead of being stuck in the valley of uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, I always want to give a shout out to one of my mentors. His name's Shami Baba, and Shami, he would talk to me about as you guys call it, hard money lending, or here in Canada, we call it private mortgages. And I remembered him talking, and he was so sure of what he was talking about. Here's the outcome. And I thought, how does he know that this is what's going to happen? Now, he would end up sharing with me how we can know, look, you're going to do this, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then you're going to get there. So the question is, how much do you want to do? Do you want to put in right now, if that's where it's going to get you? And I remember falling over, like I felt like a ton of bricks falling over, thinking, what? You can actually plan things out in that way? Why does everyone make it seem like it's just an illusion out there? If it's like closing your eyes and firing a dart, and hopefully you get there. And up until that moment, I would not have been able to have any idea. You would have been talking about wishing on a star with that statement. And now I'm hearing this and I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, you've got to, it's a good refresher to go, do I know what my property is out there? Because otherwise, how do you map it out to get there?
Exactly.
Okay. So Oh man, guys, I hope as you're listening to Mike sharing about his path and how he's gotten to where he's gotten to, I hope that you guys are hearing the power of his message. And again, I just want to share his book, Owner Shift by Mike Malatesta. And now, Mike, let's just quickly go over to the podcast.
Sure.
Neil, just before you do, I'll just let you know we're on the hour. Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Oh,
Got it.
thank you.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now, just I want to make sure that we go back here, and I don't want to miss this part. You've got your book. People can read that and really understand the shift that they need to make as the owner. But you've got the podcast. How did it happen? Tell us a little bit about the podcast and what you're trying to do with that.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing the podcast for about 3 years. So I've got, a couple hundred episodes out there, Neil. And it's a very simple concept. I explore stories of success in all disciplines, right? So entrepreneurs, physicians, academics, philanthropy, you name it. And I have one goal in there, and that is that I want to dig really deep into these stories. I want to uncover the clues, and I want to share them with the people that are listening, because I want to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness inside everyone that's listening. And these people that I have on, by and large, are people that, if you're in their circles and you look at them, you say, wow, how did they become what they've become? And I kind of want to demystify that process, because almost to a person, none of these people started on top of the mountain. They started just like any listener. They were a listener at one point, and they share, and we talk about and we explore these simple, these what seem like simple things that happen, but were profound, sort of like what you and I have been talking about, where it's the intersection of their life with a person. It's the intersection of their life with an idea. It's the intersection of their life with a saying yes when everyone else was saying no. It's the intersection with a mentor. It's the intersection with the sheer grit to move past something that most people stop at. And they were, they were all, almost like I said, to a person, in your shoes at one point in their life. So they're here telling you how they got into a different pair of shoes. If you listen to that, I'm just, I'm hoping that activates something in you, because we all have greatness inside of us that's underutilized. And as I said near the beginning of this podcast, especially for an entrepreneur, if you're not thinking big, I just think you're making a mistake. Life is a hard game, man. So you might as well be thinking as big as you can think, and as great as you can think. And that's what I'm trying to do with the podcast.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Final question here I've got to ask is about your mission here to a thousand get 1,000 business owners to, or entrepreneurs to $20 million
in value, right?
In value.
Yeah.
How do people volunteer for that?
Well, so I can't single-handedly do that kind of a thing. So what I've done so far, so this is my path so far. I've invested in over 100 companies. Now, a lot of those investments, some of them have been direct, but a lot of them have been through investing syndicates. If you're familiar with an investing syndicate like Angel List or something like that, that's the path that I've chosen. And that path has allowed me to make modest investments in a lot of companies that have great potential, a lot of entrepreneurs that have great potential. But I it's not all on me. Like, the syndicate does due diligence on the company. They make recommendations. They're actually the leader. I'm playing a small role, but my mission allows me to play a role. So I'm in 100 right now. Will all of those be worth $20 million? No, of course not. A lot of them will fail, but that's the start, right? So I'm 10% of the way there, theoretically, to 1,000. And I'm just going to continue on that path to get to 1,000. So I don't know how many I'll have to go through to get to 1,000, and it'll take me a long time. I mean, I started that a couple of years ago. I'm 56 now. It'll take me my lifetime probably to do that, and that's fine. But it's like everything in life, like any big goal or any big future that you want to own as your property. If you think about how you're going to do it from A to Z right now, it's going to be an overwhelming thought, and you're probably not going to do anything. You're probably just going to think about it.
Yeah.
So I've started, so my path to say A to Z being that the achievement of that goal is I started making these investments, and I started finding these people who I could, partner and collaborate with. And it's got me to, 100 or so. And so, that's given me the confidence that yes, it's possible. I've already started to make that part of my future, my property. And all I need is another 900 or whatever it takes with the ones that fail.
Yeah.
Or one of them goes to $1 billion, and that takes care of a lot of, ones that fail. So, yeah, that's how I came up with that, and that's how I'm approaching it.
That's great, and the thought, of course, occurs as people are listening, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are always there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are looking for investors, angel investors, and the like.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way for people to perhaps reach out and look for those type of opportunities? Where would you send people that are looking for investors, or of the type looking for dollars?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like I would say a systematic thing. First thing I would do is, the people who know me, I would go there first, right? They're most likely, and then the people in your community.
So right now, if you're looking for money, you're trying to raise investors, the first thing you want to do is you want to go over to Mike's podcast, and you want to start by subscribing and start a conversation.
Very good. Yeah, there you go.
He's giving you the path, guys. He's giving you the path to success right now.
Yeah, come to my podcast. Come listen. I've got a couple of episodes with a guy named Phil Nadel, Nadel. He runs a syndicate called Forefront Venture Partners. He invests in a ton of early stage companies. Whether he invests in your company or not, follow him, learn about him, become an investor in his syndicate. You can do that with a very modest amount of money and get yourself tied into somebody who can help you.
Wow, brilliant. Well, guys, I hate to say it, we've taken up as much time as we are able to do from Mike. So if you want to get more of him, again, you can go check out his podcast, How It Happened. You can get his book, Owner Shift, by Mike Malatesta. Any other ways that people can get a hold of you, can follow you, can do any of these things?
Come to my website. It's my name, Mike Malatesta, Malatesta. .com. You can connect with me there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm active there as well, and sign up for my newsletter. You can do that at the website as well, and you'll get some weekly inspiration and activation blog just for you. And come see me. And
Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you for sharing your life and your journey, and obviously some of the valleys. I know there's so much more that we didn't even get into, but people can definitely get more of you. They can get your book and to learn some more of those stories and find out where you've come from. But I just thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thanks for having me, Neil. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you guys later. Take care.